So it's also interesting to me because I've been struggling for years with a paper that I wrote in a brief form in 2006, and as Bijou knows, I'm now trying to finalize it. The results were so surprising that I just didn't know how to write it up, and I just let all my other work come first before I did it. So this was a very, very simple experiment. It's the first experiment I ever engaged in, and yet I'm only now, dotting the I's and crossing the T's on the write-up. But in any event, I'm going to argue that our experiment is illustrating the power of cueing, cueing something, giving people a certain context. So it's very much in the Anne Swidler idea, and it's very of culture, and it's very much in the Jerry Mackey idea that we have, latent values. We can act in different ways depending upon which ones you activate. So I'm going to argue there's presence of multiple and inconsistent worldviews. Which one it applies depends on the decision context. That also very much is true for the paper that Susan and Anne presented today. You could get these women being so feisty when it comes to beating up the mistress of the husband, but put them in a classroom where they think they're getting some, mystical education. I only wish my students had ever thought education was so great as your subject similarly seem to think. Oh, well, that's an interesting statement. I'm 4 minutes away, so there's no problem. Let's see. So these same people who could be very feisty and violent and brutal in one situation are just meek as mice in another situation. So it's not the people, it's not the values, it's the situation. And deliberation can change the situation. So it's really, really a very exciting set of ideas. As Jerry writes, citing Jean Polo, social conventions and norms. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. As Mackey writes, citing Christina Bicchieri, social conventions and norms that coordinate our actions in a reference group are not applied generally, but are conditional on the context. Okay, so this is the lead-in to what I did. So this is my one page on the experimental design. I had 582 students who were in 6th or 7th grade. The reason I picked that set of grades is because that's the oldest set of kids, such that there's no selection out effects. Everybody in this part of India who was 11 or 12 or 13 years old was in school. And you get any older, then you're out of junior high school, and villages don't even have high schools. So there's no magic to 6th and 7th grade, but it just was a convenience to solve a selection problem. And then I put them in a room of 6 kids, and I asked them to solve mazes in 2 sessions of 15 minutes. And 95% of these kids has never laid eyes on a maze before. So I both have to teach them what a maze is and how to solve it, and then I give them 2 15-minute sessions to do it. And the kids are treated very nicely. When they walk in, there's an orange. I had lovely women to explain everything. The women did not know what the point of the experiment was. And there were 3 treatments. And all of the women teachers engaged in all 3. And kids were randomly assigned to the 3. So the first one is the control treatment. No personal information was revealed, and 3 high caste H, 3 low caste boys are in the classroom. And then you explain what a maze is and how you solve a maze and how you're going to be rewarded. You're going to get money for solving these mazes. The second treatment I call the weak identity treatment. It's just the same as the first, except as soon as the 6 kids are seated in the room, the experimenter says, well, I just want to review, who you are. And the experimenter turns to each person, like I turn to Ghazala and say, so you're Ghazala Mansouri, and you're from village X, and you're from caste Y, and your father's name is Z, and your grandfather's name is Q. And I do that for all 6 kids. And by the way, I have this information for all the kids in all the treatments, because when I recruit them, the recruiters write it down. So for all the kids know that we know a whole lot about them. but I make it public, and these 6 kids in the room generally don't know each other. What I tried to the extent possible was to have 6 kids drawn from 6 different villages. And then the third treatment, strong identity, is just the same as the last, except the 6 kids in the room were all high caste or all low caste. And that could never happen by chance, never. Because they're just, only 20% of the population is high caste and only 20% of the population is low caste. So if you do the probability, it's less than 2%. Okay, so this is what a session looks like. And I have buses that bring them in from all over. And this is what our beautiful subjects look like. And of course, they're all sitting together in the bus. But then they're put in a kind of holding room where they're not allowed to talk to each other. They're entertained. And then one from each bus, I'm just about done, will come into a room. So what is our prediction of the identity effects? Well, if you look at Claude Steele's work on stereotype threat, you'll say that the high caste in the identity treatments should perform better, and the low caste should perform worse. Whereas if you look at a view that context matters, you would say, well, you're cueing an ascriptive ideology. And a high caste person would see that, hey, he's high caste, he's on top, he doesn't have to prove himself. He's already won the Nobel Prize, he's a Brahmin. And the low caste would have activated thoughts of punishment for attempts at upward mobility. You're not supposed to excel if you're a low caste. So both people should work worse if the, let's say, Swidlerian view is the dominant thing that's going on, and you should get this difference if the dominant thing is the Claude Steele thing. So now I'm going to show you a picture where I'm going to show you the performance under peace trade and under tournament for these kids. So in the control treatment, the anonymous treatment, there's really no difference between the high and low caste. And just as you'd expect, when there's a tournament treatment where you get 6 rupees for each maze you solve, conditional on solving the most mazes in your group. So you'd get more than the day's wage of an adult person. So you really get a lot of money. People do better. They do significantly better under tournament and peace rate, which is just where you're, if I give you twice as much money to dig a well, you should dig more wells. Okay, in the weak identity treatment, tournament doesn't do anything. And notice, you get a little bit of the Claude Steele thing because now the low caste kids are doing a little worse. This was the amazing result. In the low caste tournament, they do much worse. They are scared to death of excelling. And remember, in the strong identity treatment, they're competing against other low caste kids. Nobody wants to be the best low caste kid because that's the one, whose head gets off, whose head gets cut off. So I took this as strong evidence that priming an individual's descriptive social identity shapes his response to economic incentives. Because if my social rank is fixed, why try? If attempts at social mobility are punished, why risk them? So here's my last slide. Development is not, as many economists will tend to look at it, just about creating opportunities for productive activities. It's also about changing the toolkit that is culture and that determines whether we engage in things like genital mutilation and early marriage or not responding to economic incentives because we have some ascriptive status we want to adhere to. And this can't be taught. I appreciate the wonderful example from Paramonita about how 4 years after, some training program, this person can get all excited and do verbatim accounts. But clearly, there was an element of participation. She was hearing stories from different people. What you're learning about is how other people think and the possibilities of thinking in different ways, and that maybe the way you think is shared by other people. So that's why participation is key, and frames matter and can have very powerful effects. You don't have to change a person's value. You could just change the frame, or you can change the social meaning associated with particular acts. Okay, thank you very much.